All right, good evening to you all. Thank you for coming out to the Monday, September 9th, 2019 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We're delighted you're all here with us this evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order and ask that you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And let's have our Girl Scouts maybe lead us. You guys like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, think it over. Come on. Flag's back here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Appreciate that. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have a motion regarding the meeting agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Do we
Second.
have a second? All right, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? The ayes have it. So we have a number of proclamations, special proclamations this evening, and so we're going to go ahead and get on with those. Some of the different council members are going to read the proclamation, and if it's a proclamation relating to an interest of yours, if you'd like to come up and say a few words afterwards, you're welcome to at the two podiums we have here on the side, and maybe we'll get some of you all, or all of you all, to come up for a photo as well if you'd like to receive the proclamation. So our first proclamation is a memorial resolution honoring one of Falls Church favorite sons, Lou Olam. And I believe Councilman Snyder is going to go ahead and read that.
Sure, thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. It's entitled a memorial resolution honoring Louis T. Olam. Whereas with the passing of Louis Lou T. Olam on July 25, 2019, Falls Church lost a valued and beloved resident. And whereas as a member of the Falls Church city community since 1953, Lou was a very active volunteer and engaged citizen. And whereas he had a long career of service to his country in the field of international affairs, and whereas Lou contributed greatly to the community through his service as a leader in the improvement of the city's school system by serving as a school board member, and as a decades-long champion of the International Baccalaureate Diploma program in the schools, and whereas he helped to sustain the fabric and appearance of the community through his tireless engagement and his organizing support for the Citizens for a Better City, the Village Preservation and Improvement Society, and other civic organizations. And whereas Lou received numerous recognitions and accolades, among them the Spirit of Falls Church Award and the designation of Lou Olam Day to celebrate the occasion of his 100th birthday on July 10, 2017. And
Now, there be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, recognizes with great admiration and appreciation the contributions of Louis T. Olam over the course of his life and career, and offers sincere condolences to his family. So is there any member of his family, maybe his daughter, here with us tonight? Anyone there? It doesn't look like they were able to make it out, or any of them will make it out tonight, but we'll make sure it gets to the family. And he was a great member of our community. Vice Mayor Connolly, do you have something you wanted to add?
I think they may be watching, so
Okay.
we send our condolences to you, and we were so glad to have Lou be part of our community for so many years. He made a real difference.
He absolutely did make a difference, and just a very, very special person, and it was a great honor to call him a Falls Church resident. Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, Lou Olam and I knew very well Sue Olam as well. They both contributed a huge amount to this community, and this resolution only begins to list the contributions that they made, and then Lou in his later years after Sue passed away. Lou was a true giant who worked elbow to elbow with other true giants like Edward R. Murrow, rather. And throughout his life, the community and public service were number one. And he not only talked about that, but he acted on it, I think, 24/7 all the way through his life. So Lou is one of these people that has literally made this community what it is today. And it's a small honor that we do with this resolution, but it does recognize that Lou was a true giant in our community but also a true giant in the history of this nation. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next proclamation relates to Welcoming Week in the City of Falls Church. I think many of us, if not all of us, were just at a very nice reception or ceremony in our downtown park, and we've got some of the folks here in the audience, and you're welcome to speak after the proclamation is read if you'd like as well. But Letty Hardy is going to do the honors, who's had some great involvement, shown leadership in this issue as well. So, Ms. Hardy?
Great, thank you, Mayor. So before I read the proclamation, I think I wanted to acknowledge I saw Paul Boson and Hannah Jordan, who've been leaders in our community. So thank you for creating this organization and the wonderful kickoff event that we're all at. Whereas Falls Church's Vision 2040 envisions a city as a welcoming and inclusive community, and whereas a uniquely welcoming environment can distinguish the city, weaving together our cultural fabric, helping us overcome forces that would divide us, enhancing our relationships, and improving the well-being of city residents through community. And whereas a welcoming environment for all individuals also enhances the city's economic growth, global competitiveness, and overall prosperity for current and future generations. And whereas immigrants are a vital part of our community, enriching our culture, bringing fresh perspectives and new ideas, starting businesses, and contributing to the vibrant diversity that our city values. And whereas city residents have encouraged the City of Falls Church to engage with Welcoming America, and whereas Welcoming America inspires people to build a community that embraces hospitality towards immigrants and refugees and opportunity for all, and whereas Welcoming America provides resources to local governments in developing public policy models that help immigrants become full participants in their communities, and whereas Welcoming America is leading a movement of inclusive communities to help make everyone who lives in America to feel like they belong.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby designate the week of September 13th through the 22nd, 2019 as Welcoming Week in the City of Falls Church and proclaim the city's support for Welcoming America by exploring ways to engage and collaborate with Welcoming Falls Church. So as Letty mentioned, we've got some folks here in the audience. I see Hannah and I see Paul. I don't know if Christine made it as well, but please come forward and tell us a little bit more about your activities. You're definitely a group that I think is near and dear to a lot of our hearts, so thank you for your good work.
Thank you so much. It was nice to see so many of you tonight at the Welcoming Week launch and the ice cream party, and courtesy of Little City Creamery also. And we're just excited to spread our message of welcoming immigrants and refugees into our community and finding ways that we can partner with you all, with the city schools, with the greater community, with library, with everyone that we can to find ways to create a more welcoming community, which includes providing opportunities for people to be able to live in our city, to be able to afford to live here, and to benefit from our wonderful schools so that it's not just that we just keep growing and caring for each other. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll also add, my name is Paul Boson. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all previously and again tonight. I want to thank you all in so many parts of the city's government, for collaborating with us. Most notably, most recently, what a great downtown park. So thanks for your support of that. That could be a great public space. And so it was neat to experience some of that tonight. Just a couple of quick notes. Want to make sure also for others that you all have a bit of background about what's happening. Welcoming America is an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization. It's founded in 2009. Welcoming America says its purpose is to build a nation of neighbors by encouraging local initiatives like ours, Welcoming Falls Church here, to build communities of neighbors. And so that's what we're hoping to do. Welcoming America says that about 1/8 of the American population lives in a welcoming community. These are cities or counties that have become a part of this movement. So this is a movement with momentum. Even though you might not, reading the media, you might not believe that's the case. But this year, Welcoming Week is the focus of activities of Welcoming America organizations around the country. That's coming up September 13th through 22nd. This year, there will be over 2,500 activities around the country in the approximately 200 communities that are part of this movement. One of the things, if it's permitted, I'll ask that the clerk distribute the calendar of the many activities that we'll have in Falls Church coming up later this month. Finally, I'll just, one thing that I think I'd mention that we have to be careful of as we think about this as a movement, as we think about caring for immigrants and refugees, we have to be really careful of stereotyping. Our goals are hospitality and opportunity, and it's opportunity that's worth dwelling on for just a quick moment. Immigrants and refugees are not necessarily economically disadvantaged in need of help. In fact, about 43% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by either first or second generation immigrants. Those percentages are even higher in the tech sector and our society's most dynamic economic sectors. As we think about that locally, what does that mean? It means the sort of energy that you all might have felt down there, if we can figure out how to weave together a cultural fabric of this community and invite people into the sort of dynamism that, Letty Hardy spoke about, Marcus Simon spoke about down there at the park a moment ago. That's a story of dynamism. It's the kind of community we want. We hope it can contribute to it. So I'd like to briefly introduce Mike Sakata, our colleague, to make a couple final remarks.
Thank you all. First off, definitely want to thank Paul, Hannah, and for this welcoming vision. But reality, what is welcoming Falls Church? You think about, how can we be more welcoming? Welcome to welcoming Falls Church. Great. It's funny. It's but at the end of the day, there's an issue. There's a reason why. Paul saw that gap, and just as he talked about earlier, those examples. But everyone in this room has been touched by the lives of an immigrant or somebody else who is not from Falls Church City, okay, or possibly from America for that matter. So at the end of the day, what we want to do, what I'm trying to do, and Paul and Hannah all trying to do here, is take this and actually do something with it, right? Not just talk about it. We love the proclamation. We appreciate it. We want that, and we appreciate you, everyone here, for seeing that there's a need. So for us, it's about having activities that we have a event. This just, as Paul said, the welcoming the Falls Church Ice Cream Party down there at our Patrick Grass. They'll be named later, and we have on Saturday Mbulo Mbue coming to Falls Church City, a person who grew up and kind of saw Falls Church City for the beauty that it is. And, but for us, it's about getting involved, going to welcomingfallschurch.org and, make a difference. Have a block party. Have people over to your house. Have people over to your house that you wouldn't normally have. But it's about being more welcoming. And for us, it's about giving people the tools to do that. And thank you all very much for that.
All right, thank you very much. Why don't you come forward and we'll give this proclamation to you. Would you like to come on forward maybe for a photo and the proclamation?
Forward this one.
I know Mr. Z would like to make a few remarks before we move on. So, Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. This is especially poignant with respect to who I am and where I came from as a first-generation immigrant with my family, a refugee from communist China by way of Hong Kong, as I say, many reigns ago. And so, as I say, look at me now. But this has been an incredible country. Back then, they had just, as you recall, right after the Korean War, had taken an act of Congress, legislation passed that overturned the Chinese Exclusion Act. And the people that sponsored us over had to, from the community, raise bonds, promise my father a job, and back them up in case he didn't make it as, I think, a house painter at the time, and a car, and all those things. So those, I believe, are the roots that gave rise to the sentiment that continues to this current day. And so I'd like to express my appreciation for this wonderful country we live in. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, our next proclamation is declaring September 11th, 2019 as Day to Serve here in Falls Church. And that, I believe, is going to Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I love days like today in Falls Church. Some of the small things that we do through civic engagement shows that Falls Church stands up for what matters, not just through words and proclamation, but through actions. And welcoming Falls Church, the period clothing for women's suffrage, all of those little things are what's wonderful about our community. And in the current environment of abrasive and caustic political discourse, it's good that Falls Church can show that we can be a small beacon, small example of constructive, civic, collaborative dialogue to get some things done here. So it's just, it's been a great day altogether. It's great to see, so thank you. Proclamation declaring September 11, 2019 as Day to Serve in the City of Falls Church. Whereas volunteer efforts strengthen and enrich the City of Falls Church, and the city's volunteers are selfless, energetic, creative, passionate, and professional. And whereas the Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act, approved by Congress and enacted into law on April 21, 2009, designated September 11 to be observed as an annual National Day of Service and Remembrance. And whereas Day to Serve is an annual event that transcends political and religious differences to unite people of all faiths, races, cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds with the shared goal of helping those in need and improving communities. And whereas beginning on September 11, 2019, numerous service projects will take place throughout the City of Falls Church, many of which will last into October. And whereas on Day to Serve, individuals, faith groups, businesses, government agencies, and organizations throughout the City of Falls Church are invited to support, participate in, or organize local projects to enhance the community and help those in need.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim September 11th, 2019 as Day to Serve in the City of Falls Church and encourage residents to offer their time and talents within the community and make an ongoing commitment of service. Is there anyone here in the community or in the audience that wishes to get up and speak about this? Please come forward.
I'm not sure if this is the time, but I'm here representing Barb Cram, and I are working together on Day to Serve this year for
Great.
Our faith-based community, and we are going to have a Feed the Hungry food drive. And on September 21st from 9 to 3, we are going to be canvassing grocery stores, neighborhoods in Falls Church to donate food to the two Falls Church food pantries at the Columbia Baptist Food Pantry and Falls Church Service Council Food Pantry. And we came to get the proclamation for that.
All right, well, come on down.
Thank you.
You're the next contestant. Come on down, and we'll give you this. Thank you, and thank you for your service. We all appreciate it. All right, our next proclamation is declaring September 2019 as Suicide Prevention Month. And that is Mr. Z, I believe. No, is it? Oh, would you guys switch? Okay, so Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 24. And whereas for every reported death by suicide, there are approximately 12 documented attempts of self-harm. And whereas suicide is the most preventable cause of death and the vast majority of suicidal individuals display warning signs, and whereas public awareness of the warning signs and the networks available for at-risk individuals are essential to continue lowering the rates of suicide. And whereas community organizations and grassroots support are essential to continuing the fight against suicide and the loss of lives, and whereas reducing the stigma by discussing suicide and increasing the awareness of available resources for those suffering from suicidal thoughts is important to maintaining the health of our community. And whereas the City of Falls Church's Housing and Human Services unit provides referrals to organizations that are dedicated to reducing the frequency of suicide attempts and deaths and soothing the pain for survivors affected by suicides. And whereas awareness of these resources saves lives and provides vital support to people facing life crises, trauma, and contemplating suicide by providing information, education, and support. Whereas Crisis Link provides free and confidential crisis and suicide prevention information and referral services through their hotline at 703-527-4077 or by texting CONNECT to 85511.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim September 2019 as Suicide Prevention Month in the City of Falls Church and commend Crisis Link for their work to prevent suicide in our community. Is there anyone in the audience here to accept this proclamation? All right, well, let's keep moving on then. Our next proclamation is a proclamation declaring September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. And I believe Mr. Duncan will do the honors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We all know that America has its flaws, as did the gentleman whose portraits hang on our walls. But we all understand that conscientious Americans are always in the business of creating a more perfect union. And in that spirit, I'm pleased to read this proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas the U.S. Constitution defined two axioms for our nation, the first for basic human equality and the second for a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent founding document, the anniversary of its creation, and whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas the Congress, by joint resolution of August 2nd, 1956, leading to Public Law 915, providing a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and whereas in doing so, we recommit ourselves to the enduring principles of the Constitution, where we, the people of the United States, establish this Constitution and therefore secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, do hereby proclaim September 17th through 23rd, 2019 as Constitution Week in the City of Falls Church, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787. All right. And let's move on to our next Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, come on forward. My apologies. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I really want to thank the council for allowing us to join in on the proclamations today. And actually, I thought it was really perfect with Welcoming Week. You know, here we have one of the most important founding documents of our nation, and now we're talking about the immigrants that strengthen us. And I think they go together. And Mr. Duncan, I truly appreciate what you said. We all have our flaws, but this is an amazing document. We have an amazing country, and together we can make it stronger. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, but I'm Lynn Sherlock from the Falls Church chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And we brought forth this proclamation, and we thank you very much for allowing us to be here today to accept it. And if I could, I'd like to welcome my chapter mates to come on up to receive it.
Absolutely. Why don't you all come on down and we'll get a photo and give you this proclamation. All right, our next proclamation relates to women's suffrage. And Mary Beth Conley, our Vice Mayor, is going to do the honors.
And for this proclamation, I invite all council members to put on a sash that is on your chair.
Does it come with instructions?
It only has one moving part. Let's see if I can tackle
Maybe we can get it on there.
it. I've never worn a sash before.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
How they going?
No.
This was not rehearsed, you can tell. Huh?
You can tell that
You guys aren't building much confidence.
Well, we can build a $120 million high school, by God.
Yes. Does Dan need help? Because he got it.
We need to get our Girl Scouts
have
up here
it?
to help us with these sashes. All
That's good. Dan's good. Dan's good enough.
right.
Mine is a little lumpy, but you know, what the heck.
You're crooked. Yeah, yours is all messed
Am
up.
I crooked? Yeah, well.
We knew you were crooked, Phil.
I rely on my daughter for all these
There you
things.
go. There. Now put it under your arm
This,
on that side.
this arm?
Yes. There you go. All right, we good?
Seems like it's backwards.
Let's flip it up.
Oh, my goodness.
Somebody should have told me how to do this before.
Now you can sit down.
Are we sitting?
Yes. So this is a proclamation declaring September 2019 through August 2020 as Falls Church Women's Suffrage Centennial Year. Whereas the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guaranteed American women the right to vote, a right known as women's suffrage, was ratified on August 18, 1920. And whereas the City Council wishes to honor the trailblazing Falls Church women who fought for and achieved gains in equality since the ratification of the 19th Amendment, and whereas in May 1908, esteemed Falls Church resident Maddie Gundry became the first woman elected by the Falls Church Town Council as a school trustee, and served in that position for several months before she was declared ineligible by the county superintendent and circuit court because she was a woman. And whereas Maddie Gundry and fellow Falls Church resident Ida Quick Hawkshurst helped form the Women's Suffrage League of Fairfax in September 1913 and served as president and vice president respectively. And whereas Maddie Gundry, Ida Hawkshurst, and other notable women from Falls Church and throughout Virginia lobbied and petitioned their representatives, senators, and the President of the United States to support and pass the Susan B. Anthony Amendment extending to women the right to vote. And whereas African American women, including Falls Church resident Mary Ellen Henderson, facing discrimination on the basis of both gender and race, were powerful voices for women's rights and civil rights in the face of continued efforts to disenfranchise African Americans. And whereas Maddie Gundry and Mary Smith became the first women elected to the Falls Church Town Council in 1921, and many women followed in their footsteps, including Carol DeLong, who was the first woman to serve as mayor of the City of Falls Church in 1980. And whereas women remain underrepresented in government at the local level, where women make up 35% of Falls Church City's elected officials, at the state level, where women make up 26.4% of the Virginia legislature, and at the national level, where women make up 24% of Congress. And whereas, in honor of this anniversary, we wish to celebrate the progress that has been made towards securing women's full participation in our democracy and renew our commitment to advance equal rights for all individuals, regardless of gender, sexual identity or orientation, race or ethnicity, or ability.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim September 2019 through August 2020 as Falls Church Women's Suffrage Centennial Year in the City of Falls Church, and encourage all residents to learn about women's history, participate in Centennial Year activities, and continue to vote in the record numbers that Falls Church is known for. All right, we've got some folks in the audience. We'd love to have you all come forward, and you're certainly welcome to speak as well if you'd like to. Would you all like to come forward and receive the proclamation? And again, you're welcome to speak if you so choose.
We'd like the DAR and the League to join us, too. I just want to add, we're going to start our celebration at Fall Festival this weekend. We've got a booth, and we're going to be joined there by the DAR, and the League of Women Voters has their booth, so some come learn about women's suffrage. So we'll look forward to seeing you there.
And I'd just like to note that there are members of the AAUW and the DAR and the League of Women Voters here tonight, as well as the Women's History Group. And several of them are headed off to the community center because they have a forum tonight on passing the Equal Rights Amendment, which is the next big issue for Virginia. So that is going on in the community center tonight.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make one additional comment. You know, the ladies that were up here represent, I figure, pretty close to 90 to 100 years of public service. So I want to thank you so much for all that you've done with this community. This is not a one-night sort of celebration for you all. You've celebrated the importance of equality and the ability to participate in public service in very direct ways in service of this community and the nation. So I want to thank you very much for that.
All right. Thank you all. And our next proclamation is a proclamation declaring Hispanic Heritage Month, and that is also, I believe, Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Mr. Z's taking that one.
Okay.
We swapped.
All right.
Whereas the Hispanic presence and influence in the United States of America dates back to the early 1500s, and whereas Latinos have participated throughout the history of the United States in support and defense of the principles and ideals upon which this country was founded, and whereas Hispanics have made significant contributions in all phases of our economic, social, cultural, and political life, and whereas Latinos account for approximately 11% of the City of Falls Church's population and number more than 50 million residents in the United States, and Hispanics constitute a diverse group with origins in 21 different Spanish-speaking countries in the world whose heritage links them with North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean islands, Africa, Asia, and Europe, and whereas Latinos contribute to the great diversity and unity of the City of Falls Church with a rich history of different cultures, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and ancestry within Hispanic communities, and whereas as a community and as a government, we are proud of the cultural enrichment brought by the diversity of the Hispanic population.
All right, before I do the now therefore, I think we've got someone maybe in the back row. Hector, would you like to come forward and read this in Spanish for our edification? Mr. Gomez?
Proclamación. Considerando que la presencia e influencia hispanas en los Estados Unidos de América datan de principios del siglo XVI, y considerando que, a lo largo de la historia de los Estados Unidos, los latinos han participado en apoyo y defensa de los principios e ideales en los que se fundamenta este país, y considerando que los hispanos han contribuido de manera importante en todas las fases de nuestra vida económica, social, cultural y política, y considerando que los latinos representan aproximadamente el 11% de la población de la ciudad de Falls Church y suman más de 50 millones de residentes en los Estados Unidos, y considerando que los hispanos constituyen un grupo diverso con orígenes de 21 diferentes países hispanohablantes del mundo, cuyos antepasados los vinculan con Norte, Centro, Suramérica, las islas del Caribe, África, Asia y Europa, y considerando que los latinos contribuyen a la gran diversidad y unidad de la ciudad de Falls Church con una rica historia de diferentes culturas, orígenes raciales y étnicos y linaje en el seno de las comunidades hispanas, y considerando que como comunidad y como gobierno estamos orgullosos del enriquecimiento cultural que nos brinda la diversidad de la población hispana.
Now therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2019 as Hispanic Heritage Month in the City of Falls Church, and urge all citizens to join and support the city's celebration of the rich heritage of our Hispanic residents. All right, would you like to come forward and receive these proclamations? We'd love to have you come forward.
sign your name in Spanish, Mayor.
Yeah, here you guys. All right, thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we're about done with proclamations, other than the Proclaiming Today Proclamation Day. Before we move on, are you guys Brownies or Girl Scouts? You what? Juniors, do you guys want to get up and introduce yourselves? Get on TV real quick? Why don't you tell us the name of your troop or your den?
We're Troop 711.
Okay, and what's your all's names?
I'm Addie.
I'm Evia.
Ashley.
And do you have a project you're working on?
Yes. So we're juniors from Girl Scout Troop 711, and we've been working on our Bronze Award, which is the highest award in Girl Scouts for juniors. And on Labor Day, we organized a trash pickup around Trips Run in Cavalier Trail Park. We had 19 volunteers participate, and we picked up about 4 bags of trash and 1 bag of recycling. Between the 19 volunteers, we spent more than 30 hours of community service. And our objective is that we hope by our actions of cleaning up the city for our Girl Scout Bronze Award, that we will inspire more people to do so as well.
Also, something that we found was that there was more trash in the creek than in the park, and that shows us that a lot of the trash is carried by rain and runoff and ends up in local water systems. And also, we wanted to say that you don't have to be an environmental person to help clean up trash. All you have to do is see trash and pick it up. Helping Mother Nature is helping everyone. And our purpose of the event was to achieve our Bronze Award, make the city cleaner, and inspire others to help make a difference by helping our earth by picking up trash. We would like to thank Lonnie Marchetti from the Department of Public Works for her support and all the supplies she provided to us, the Falls Church Target for sponsoring us, and all the volunteers who joined us to help clean our little city.
All right, well, thank you all very much. Why don't you come forward, and thank you for your service to our community.
I'd just like to add that I'm especially proud of these girls. Out of 18 from Troop 711, these 3 took their PYP exhibition projects as part of the IB Primary Years program through to complete a Bronze Award, which is the highest level award a Girl Scout junior can achieve by the end of September after their 5th grade year.
Fantastic, congratulations, y'all, that's great work.
Right in front here, ladies. Right in the middle. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, and here's some pins for each of you, what do you think? How you doing, Tanya? Here's one for you, too. Great work, you guys, awesome work. Keep it up, and you are very articulate. What grade are you all in? 6th grade, wow. All right, so that is the end of our proclamations. Are there any oaths of office to administer, Madam Clerk? All right, we're going to move on to the receipt of public comments. Are there any written comments for you all?
Sia Narouge asked council their opinion on allowing the federal government to house immigrants in the city of Falls Church, and if the city had considered declaring itself a sanctuary city for immigrants. James Coyle noted that the intersection of South Maple Avenue and Annandale Road was in need of a pedestrian crossing signal. And Joan Curry urged the city council to call for the ratification of the ERA. And we just received that one tonight.
All All right, so now we're going to move on to the receipt of public comments. And for that purpose, you can fill out a speaker slip in the back of the room or in the room just outside of our room right here. I'd ask that you fill those out, give those to the clerk, state your name when you come to the podium, and your address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. So I have 2 speaker slips, one of which I think already went, right? So that one we don't need to do. And the other speaker may have already gone as well. Elaine Johnson, did she? I think she probably also already spoke. So at the present, I don't have any additional speakers. Does anyone else in the room want to speak at this time? All right, we're going to keep going then. So are there any council requests before we move on to business?
Just one, Mr. Mayor, if I could, the letter about ratification of the ERA, can somebody remind me, Cindy, did our legislative package last time include that?
Yes.
It did, didn't it?
It did, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. I'd just also like the record to reflect our appreciation of the clerk's office for coordinating those numerous proclamations tonight.
All right, Ms. Hardy?
Yes, I wanted to follow up about the public comment we'd received about our stance on the federal government's request for the City of Falls Church to be included in their RFP for the housing for immigrants here. I think we, as a council, we need to have some discussion whether we're willing to issue a letter similar to what our neighboring jurisdictions did. And I think in all practicality, we probably don't have a facility that would fit the requirements in the RFP, but I think I would propose being very firm, as our neighbors are saying, that that is not the type of facility that we would welcome here in Falls Church. So I would like to propose that we actually issue a letter similar to what Alexandria has done.
All right, any other comment on that at this time?
Thank you. Can I?
Yes,
Thank
of
you, Ms.
course.
Hardy, for bringing that up. I would agree with you on that one, and I think we should also make a statement.
All right, any other comment? Mr. Snyder?
So consider this more of a question rather than a disagreement with the fundamentals of, I think, what the intent is. So we had a proclamation calling ourselves a welcoming community. Wouldn't we be better off with a facility like that located in a community like ours than a facility of that kind located someplace in a community that doesn't really welcome immigrants? Just a question.
Other comments? So we have at least 2 people. What's the general feeling of the council about issuing such a letter? I'm going to suggest that probably more than not would like to issue such a letter, unless other people will speak up. Is that the general feeling? Okay, I'm going to take, unless there's others that oppose, I think I'm going to take that as a yes. So, okay, we can talk a little bit offline on the specifics of that. Are there any other council requests?
I do think, Mr. Mayor, we need to respond to the question that I asked in the letter. It's not necessarily a carbon copy letter that other jurisdictions have sent. I think one could look at their letters and have an entirely different reaction than they intended. So I hope we can answer the question that I raised. I think the fact of the matter is that we would not be able to affect what went on in that institution, and I think we need to state that. It's not that we are not at all welcoming of immigrants, particularly children who have been forced apart from their families. But I think that the truth of the matter is that we would not be able to provide volunteers. We would not be able to provide our local principals in the running of that facility, and I think that's the answer. But I do think we need to respond to that particular issue in addition to stating our concerns and our position opposed to the administration's policies, which I think is the fundamental thing that we're trying to say here.
Yeah,
All right,
so,
well, maybe-
yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the distinction is that while we are welcoming of all people, we are not welcoming of those policies. And I don't think we want to participate in that. So thank you.
All right, well, let's, I think we can work out the details among us, hopefully, that it's something we can all agree on. But I think the sentiment is probably shared by all of us, or I would suspect it is. So, all right, any other council requests? If not, let's move on to the report of the city manager. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. I have several things to report on, and I'll start with one that's a little bit unpleasant. This morning at approximately 6:15, the city experienced a vehicle fire here at City Hall, and it was determined to be an arson, and there is a suspect that is in custody. And so a couple of things I want to note about that. One, it was very startling. This fire was set this morning on a marked sheriff's vehicle. And so for our employees who were coming to work this morning, they came by this burnt vehicle. So we'll be having a meeting with employees tomorrow morning just to answer questions about the event and to address any concerns with it. But I also want to take the opportunity to recognize Officer Reynolds and Detective Henderson, who apprehended the suspect, who is now in custody at Arlington County Jail. And thank them for their work, and also thank Arlington County Fire for their quick response and for the fire marshal's work on this. We do not think that there was any real rationale behind this arson. We think it was a random event, but the investigation is ongoing. So I wanted to acknowledge that event of this morning. Other items to report on, we are wrapping up the paving on Railroad Avenue and on Kent Street. We expect that that will be finished tomorrow, Tuesday. I wanted to note on the theme of welcoming Falls Church that when this building was dedicated and when the cornerstone was unveiled with the City Council's names on it in the back, there was also a request from the City Council members that we also have something like that cornerstone front and center of City Hall that welcomes everybody to this building, and to proclaim that in many languages and to do so in a graceful and effective way. And so we're working on designs for that. This is an initiative by Councilmember Z and immediately supported by the council. And so I just wanted to remind folks that we are working on that, and we'll be bringing ideas to council on that. And I think that will be a great feature of this beautiful new building. I wanted to note good news on the hiring front. We have announced that Steve Mason will be coming to the City of Falls Church as our HR director, and he'll be starting next Monday. And I'll bring him to council so we can introduce him to you directly. But at tonight's meeting, I want to just take the opportunity to thank Cindy Mester for her work as our HR director. Cindy now has had virtually every job in the City of Falls Church, every leadership job in the City of Falls Church,
Except for one, Wyatt.
She's
City
not the mayor.
manager.
No, she's been city manager many
Okay.
times. Whenever I leave town,
Well,
she's always the
official,
acting
formal
manager.
city manager.
Yeah, that may happen one of these days. But I was going to say, except Chief of Police, but she's been our Community Development Director, our Planning Director, our Public Works Director, and many important jobs for the city. As HR Director, one of the hallmarks of this period was her focus on training for employees. So during this period, we had harassment-free workforce, workplace training, performance evaluation training, cultural inclusion training, teamwork training, computer security training, just to name a few. And these were mandatory for all employees. And one of our goals was to really take our professional development and employment training to a higher level, and Cindy has helped us so much with that. So we're looking forward to Steve Mason coming. Cindy has many irons in the fire. She also teaches for Virginia Tech, and she's the first vice president for the Virginia Local Government Managers Association, and is just a great professional in this field. So thank you, Cindy, for your work. I also wanted to note Janet Haynes, after 52 years of service as a crossing guard for the City of Falls Church, will be retiring, or is retiring, and we will have an event on September 26th to honor her. That'll be at St. James Church. I'm sorry, St. James School at 10 o'clock, and all are welcome. There'll be one really that is St. James focused at 9 a.m., but really the community is welcome at 10 a.m. So those are the items that I wanted to report on tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Shields? Mr. Z?
I assume that the loss of the car is completely covered by insurance.
It is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Ms. Hardy?
Mr. Shields, there's been some email traffic about the Northwest project.
Yes.
Where are we with that? Because I think I've lost track of which project it is, because I know we have one happening at Great Falls and West, but there's been some discussions with the neighbors kind of further south, kind of closer to Highland and Oak. Is there a staff plan on addressing the concerns we've heard?
This has been a longstanding community request to have easier walking across West Street at Oak Street in particular. And so we have considered options of a raised table, a ped crossing that is more prominently marked, and also a bump out at that location. There is a storm drain inlet right at that intersection, and that makes it more expensive and more complicated than just putting this facility in. And that really has the funding piece of it. We'd have to move that inlet box. So if I could just be given a little bit more time to give a fuller report on what the options are for the city council, and I will do so at your next meeting.
Okay, I think that makes sense. If I could just make the interim request, we've done a nice job of refreshing crosswalks around town. I think they requested that while we sort out what the best long-term option is, given those constraints with stormwater, if we can just refresh the crosswalk, I think that would help at the base of Oak. I think around Highland, I had a request that one of those pedestrian paddle crossing signs in the middle of the street's also missing. So if we can get that back up while we figure out the right long-term solution, I think that would be very helpful.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shields, at work session last week, I'd put in a request from one of our citizens, Peter Clark, related to those boxwoods at the corner of Rosemary and Lee Highway. Is there any follow-up on that?
Let me get back with you on that. That has been relayed, but let me find out what the schedule for that is.
In addition, we recently had a conversation in one of the transportation committee meetings that have been called about the spot improvements that we had discussed that came through the Transportation Commission, the Citizen Commission, about the spot improvement there near Thomas Jefferson Elementary. What's the status of that, and what are next steps related to those recommendations?
So the briefing with the council at work session was some ideas with the CACT. We wanted to get council feedback on those. The feedback for that one was particularly positive. The other recommendation, there are a couple of follow-up questions we have on that. That was the Maple Avenue sidewalk. So we want to finalize those and get those in process. And I'll get back to council in terms of what it would take and what the timing for those projects will be.
This is a matter of protocol. Is one linked to the other?
No.
Meaning if they're still, okay.
They're separate.
So one could move ahead while we're still deciding in the other?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, there's been some very positive feedback from folks about the improvement to the intersection there near the elementary school. So now that that's been discussed, I know that there are a lot of folks that would like to see that happen. So thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Could I return for a moment to Northwest Street on the east side, which I don't believe I heard you mention when you were talking to Ms. Hardy there, where they're not the project that we're doing with the county at the intersection of Great Falls, but the crosswalk that temporarily existed just a little ways in on Northwest Street, which went away. Can that be included in the refreshing regime that you were asked about? That actually is also, as you know, goes back many years. But we did have it there for a time, and it was taken out because of an objection from a resident, I believe, but that resident moved away, and apparently the new people who live where the crosswalk would go are enthusiastic about having one, so that's at least what I hear. And the second thing is, there were some photos posted this morning about various refuse and trash behind the Rite Aid, which is no longer the Rite Aid, of course. Just want to make sure that we not only are mowing, but also keeping a handle on the trash and dumpsters and clothing donation boxes. And there also was a question about a clothing donation box right across from the Founders Row construction site. Not really sure who governs those things. They just sort of pop up. And anyway, could we keep on the Rite Aid side? Thank you.
All right, other comments? Mr. Shields? I'll just have one. I didn't ask you this beforehand, so I'm not necessarily requesting you have a full response today, but I think it would be useful, given the great interest of our community, to be able to give regular updates about stormwater and storm runoff, maybe at each of these regular meetings. It just, and I know not every meeting we're going to have big news, but just the regular drumbeat of the things that are happening here in the city to address that serious issue. Is there anything either you could say tonight or maybe at our next meeting that would just start to continue to update people? And I know there are other ways for people to get information, but I think this is one of the good ways for people to know what's going on.
I don't have an update prepared for tonight. We did discuss it at the last work session, but I think that's a point well taken to have that as a regular briefing, and we'll make sure to do that. We are making progress, and I know the community wants to hear about that progress and know what the timing of potential improvements that will roll out across the community, what the timing for those will be.
I mean, even small things, like I understand there are little, I can't remember the phrase that was used, but essentially, little things that can be done on a regular basis. I think people would like to hear about those as well.
That's right.
So, all right. Anything else that anyone would like to ask about? If not, let's move on to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk?
TR 19-27 is a resolution naming city-owned property located in the 100 block of West Broad Street, and it's RPC number 51-105-004.
All right. Mr. Shields, or who's handling this?
Mr. Snyder.
All right. Jim Snyder, welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a resolution recommending that the city-owned property in the 100 block of West Broad Street be named Mr. Brown's Park. This is something under the purview of City Council. In the staff report, there's a detailed discussion of the process, the public survey, and the input that was received in the possible names for the park. Names included the Little City Park, Crossroads Plaza, but by far the major emphasis from the public was some recognition of Mr. Brown and Brown's Hardware. And the recommended name in the resolution before you is designed to help honor both the business and the three generations of Browns, the Brown family, James, Horace, and Hugh, who helped run that business for 125 years. It's the oldest business in the city. The Planning Commission and the EDA have all weighed in on this and recommended that name be approved. As you know, the park is well used. It's been referred to by many things, including Downtown Plaza. The EDA has worked on the funding, making it possible, and it is well used. So the recommendation is to move to adopt the resolution before you, renaming the park Mr. Brown's Park.
All right, thank you very much. And before you sit down, Jim, I would just like to offer my appreciation for the good work you've done here in the city. I know you've spent an awful lot of time getting that park in good shape, and I know Ms. Hardy has as well, but a whole lot of folks. But in particular, I know that you've had a lot of fingers in this, your fingerprints are all over this park, and we greatly appreciate it. And beyond that, frankly, the planning for this city and some of the new development and the attention to details that make a city a great place. I know you spent an awful lot of time on those matters, so I just wanted to give you at least my thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would mention this is kind of a restoration in a sense. The park that was built in 1966, most of the bones are still there. They've been refreshed and improved. And so what was a award-winning park in 1966, honored by VPAS, has been restored and is being actively used. So I think that's within the character of the city to reuse the best of what's here. And I think tonight's event, which I was able to attend, was really a marvel just to watch all the generations of Falls Church enjoying a central small location on our main street. Thank you.
All right, so is anyone, let me ask for public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have comments or questions from City Council? Mr. Z?
I think it's a great name, and thank you for all the work that you put into this, as well as all the boards and commissions that have had a hand in this and will be weighing in. I assume that if this does pass eventually, that there will come a way to recognize that park and signage, gateway, I don't know, just other stuff, I guess. And then the question that comes to my mind is, should that happen, then what are the funding streams that we've identified for doing those improvements and modifications? Are they going to be also supported by the EDA, or is it a gift from the EDA to the city, and we're going to have to carry it forward from here on in?
We have been doing some work on some sign design, and we think it may cost about $10,000 to do a sign that would be appropriate for the site and honor the park and the names that are associated with it. Hopefully, we have enough funds in the park fund for EDA. When all is said and done, there's still some outstanding things that need to be finished to be able to afford that. I think it's about a $10,000 price tag for the sign we're considering at the moment.
All right, thanks very much.
How about, go ahead.
I was just saying, save the date for the community. So I think September 30th is kind of the grand reopening in the park. It's currently planned. We'll officially kind of open the park up under its new name to the community.
Mr. Duncan?
Just one question. Yeah, that's very exciting. The September 30th event, is it contemplated that we'll have electrical setups there so that we can have live music that is, of a professional caliber by then or at some point? Do we have a budget for that?
The power is to some extent in the hands of Dominion, so if you have friends at Dominion, you can help us. Once the electrical work is completed, they have to put it on their schedule and hook everything up. That's my understanding. There's a meter that has to go in. They have to connect the power source. I hope it can be done by then, but I have no assurance that, I don't have their calendar, if you know. So if you know folks in high places at Dominion or low places.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Hey, Jim, let me ask you one last question. The idea of a mural on the wall, what's going on with that?
I think there's discussion about it. The wall is owned by the neighbor, Mr. Jeffries, who's cooperated with us, and it's been painted, so we have a blank canvas. There'll have to be a process to go forward and think about what should be there. We're also investigating, should there be some cover over the stage to help protect people if you have a rainstorm in the middle of an electrically amplified concert, it could be a problem. So there are some fine touches that may follow. They'll have to be figured out. I think the EDA will be working on those questions along with some of the other groups in the city as to what should happen on that wall.
All right.
I believe Cultural Affairs is one of the task forces in the city is also weighing in on murals and what would be appropriate there.
All right, thank you much. Unless there are any other comments or questions, why don't we see if there's a motion here?
Mayor, I move to adopt TR 19-27.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes?
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Thank you, council. The motion passes.
All right, that's exciting. I'd say maybe we could let the folks at Brown's Hardware know as well. That would be good. All right, let's move on to our next item.
TR 19-29 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, to amend Resolution 2019-17 to authorize the issuance and sale of general obligation public improvement bonds.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Bawa?
Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of the council. We have for you an action requesting one issuance of the bond resolution for bonding for major capital projects instead of two. You may recall the earlier resolution that was brought forward in May requested $76.465 million as one tranche for this year issuance, and then a second tranche to be held next year summer. We are trying to take advantage of the favorable economic conditions and the lower interest rates right now, and issue the whole amount for the school project at this time. The school project out of this is $110.8 million, which will be a 30-year level debt. The remaining, there is $7.3 million in this issuance for the library project. And those, along with other projects, is going to be a 20-year level principal debt. Further to the discussion at the last week's work session, we have included information on page 2 of the report. If you see lines 50, a chart on line 56, that shows the debt service for the 3 key years, where the debt service peaks pretty much for the whole, and for the term of the debt. We've shown for fiscal year 20, 21, and 22 the impact of 1 issuance versus 2 issuance. And also in line 2, there is the interest income that is projected at 2% earnings on over a 6 to 7 month period in the gap of the issuance, since we're planning to close this sale in November. So that's about, instead of April, May, it is about 5 to 6 months delayed, and this is about 7 months in advance of the next issuance, which is next May, June, before the end of the next fiscal year. And it shows that the net debt service is very close in fiscal year 20 and 21, and in fact less in fiscal year 22 compared to 2 issuances for 1 issuance. While we're on this chart, I would like to bring your attention to the 3 metrics of the financial policy that we have in place at Falls Church. The 2 we remain in compliance with the 1 full issuance, that is the debt as a percentage of assessed value, which should be less than 5% per our policy, and we are well within that, whether it is 1 issuance or 2 issuances. And debt service to expenditures, our traditional policy calls for a 12% threshold. However, realizing that we would be taking on these 3 tranches, we had amended our policy to be exceeding to, but no more than 15%. And this policy we are in compliance with, even if we issue the whole amount at this time of $126.8 million. The payout ratio, which calls for paying out 25% of the debt in 5 years and 50% of the debt in 10 years, we are going to be in little off on this policy in either case. And rating agencies are aware of this. It is our intent that we will be paying down this debt and looking at the projections, depending on how we structure the bonds. But based on what we have modeled, it will take about 2 years to come back in compliance with extra to do the payout for 50 years, for 50% of the payout, and 1 year extra to do the 25% of the payout. There is a cure in the policy for that, so we are well within that compliance as well. Also, as I mentioned, the school debt of $110.8 million is going to be a 30-year level debt, and the remaining projects, the library, City Hall, and sewer, stormwater, other projects, is going to be 20-year level principal debt. Next steps include the rating agency meetings and presentations in early October, and we plan to close the bond sale in early November. With that, I will conclude my report and open up to any questions you may have.
All right, let's do that. Any questions any folks have? Mr. Lichtenhouse, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Kieran, thanks for putting that chart together.
Sure thing.
I probably came across as a little torqued up at the work session last week over this, because it is a significant increase 6 months earlier than we thought. So I appreciate you putting that together. The consultant, Joe, is that his name?
Joe Mason
Yeah,
from
Joe.
Davenport, yes.
Right. When he spoke at work session, he talked about the rate difference between 30-year and 20-year. And he had talked about a 30-year rate at around 3%, but he talked about 20-year, I thought, sub 3%, around like 2.5%. Unless I misheard him, I thought it may have been even 2.25%. Is that right?
Well, it is fluctuating, but we could like, depending on when we go, a consolidated rate of somewhere between 2.75
Yeah.
between the 20 and 30.
That's what I was
but
going to ask.
depending
So
on
our,
how the
our,
market
yeah, the
goes.
weighted cost of capital is probably below 3, so the chart that you put together is actually probably a little conservative, right?
yes.
Okay. And I just think it's important to note, for the folks that are watching this, we talk about $10 million in potential savings over the life of this debt, that it's over the life of the debt. We still got a short term, it almost looks to be a bit of a net wash here in terms of taking advantage of lower rates. But I think it's important for folks to know that the savings won't be for quite some time. I do want to make one comment, and not that I've got a particular direction one way or the other, but there are dozens, probably hundreds of cautionary tales from leading up to the last recession of municipalities and local jurisdictions taking advantage of interest rate and lending environment, and packing in as much of their capital obligations that they needed to outlay over a period of time, as much as they could to take advantage of that, and then it caught up with them and caused some serious pain after the recession, and some of them haven't recovered from that. So I think it's important for us to realize that I for one, am not incredibly optimistic about the overall national economy over the next 12 months. And even though we are talking about bond obligations related to some very important things that our voters are expecting, which I would certainly vote for, specifically the school being one, we are going to have to continue to tighten our belts and mind our money, because most of our tax base is still driven from residential assessed values. And although we're trying to solve for that ratio between residential and commercial, any kind of impact to housing prices that affect our assessments are going to impact the revenue. And we have a tremendous number of debt obligations right now, and we're looking at accelerating some of those, and things can change very quickly over the next 6 months. Generally speaking, I'm optimistic about Falls Church, just given some of the things that we've done. But one request I would have as part of this, if we are talking about accelerating, taking advantage of cost savings, which is smart, but we, to some extent, are banking that things aren't going to get significantly worse and we'd be faced with this same decision 6 months from now, I would have a request that before we go to market to sell these in November, that we've got a formal agenda item in front of council to be able to make a call on what portion of this may or may not want to be included in that particular sale. I, for one, am fully committed to the high school bonding, and that's a majority of this, and it's 30-year. We've obviously got to take care of some of these other investments, but there are some things in here, even if they're not big-ticket items, are still meaningful in terms of debt service, and something that I would like for us to be able to check back in on. How much may change in the next 60 days, I don't know, but I still think it's something that we need to discuss formally as a council before deciding to put all of this on the block to sell in November. One additional question I had, Kieran, was the Go Note series, the 20 million bridge that we took care of I guess it was this past spring. What were the terms of that?
The net term was 3.19.
3.19, and was that?
Also included a 30-year level debt design phase for the school project.
Okay.
And 20-year level principal design phase for a library and a few other projects, City Hall.
Okay. Okay. So it's not something that's going to balloon on us if we don't?
No, and that is included as part of the projections here, as
Okay.
part of the analysis. So we assume the exact rate on that one.
Okay. All right. Those were all the questions and the comments that I had. Generally speaking, supportive given the numbers that we have, but again, would like to revisit this formally.
While I have your attention, I also want to mention that normally we make our payments, debt service payments, in July and January. So when we go for this issuance, since we are late, and we do the July, the next payment would be in fiscal year 2021. So that, in that case, this analysis assumes making a payment in June, so making fiscal year 20 use up the full amount of the debt service that we had projected in the budget. But there, if we structured it a little differently, we could also alleviate our fiscal year 20 principal payment, pushing it to July. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay.
All right, who's next? Ms. Hardy or Mr. Duncan? All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you for putting in that extra data that we requested. I had a question about a related point to what's on line 67. So it kind of says in there that if, come November, if interest rates actually go up, we still reserve the right to split this back into tranche number 2 and tranche number 3. Which is, I think, is what Ross is asking for, is kind of the ability to make a go, no go date. What if interest rates go down? Because I think a lot of this is predicated that we think that interest rates are really low right now, right? So if we think that between now and 60 days from now, the interest rates actually go down because the economy is worsening, and in that case, usually interest rates do go down, would we decide that, oh gosh, maybe we should wait on tranche number 3?
We have the option to do that, and we can do that fairly close to the sale, although our POS, the statement is going to be ready for the full amount, because we prepare that going closer to meeting the rating agencies. However, when we go out and make the actual sale at the market, the stock exchange, at that time, they can change the amounts, and the service fees that we get charged for underwriters and all is all adjusted based on the par amount at that time that we issue for.
Because I think the root of my concern is that we really can't predict interest rates, which is why I think that you're hearing these concerns that we want to have kind of, as we get closer, the ability to make a different call, because I think it is probably pretty tough to kind of predict the future in this case.
Exactly, and each one of your projections or crystal ball is going to say something different. So I think at that point, it would have to be a mindful decision based on how the market is trending, and we will obviously consult with our financial advisors as well.
So I would ask the city attorney whether the authorization tonight needs to have that revised language in there that affords us the opportunity to kind of make a separate decision again in November.
I don't think it's required. You will, I mean, you can always ask staff to bring it back if you wanted to ensure that they couldn't move forward without bringing it back. We could put something in there, but I just don't think it's necessary.
We'd looked into that, sorry, and it is not required because the language says up to 126.8 whatever million. So we can issue less amount, but we cannot go over that amount.
Okay. So I guess we'll just hold Mr. Shields accountable to making sure we get that scheduled. And so that aside, I think one of my general concerns is that we long socialized the financing plan for the high school, but, up to over a year, I think, prior to the referendum. And we've always talked about it as 3 tranches and to minimize the risk by spreading the debt out over 3 years. And so my request is that this feels very different to say that we're going to take all the debt out at once. And so for the amount of time and effort we invested in getting the community to come along, while we want to be nimble and take advantage of low rates, I would request that in the future, we don't just have one work session and then one kind of meeting to vote on it, because that certainly isn't fair to our constituents out there who have long kind of agreed that that was the right kind of measured approach we should take, even if we are trying to be responsive and be more financially responsible. I think a second fundamental question we all need to think about is, should we be taking out debt for projects that we don't need, especially in light of upcoming financial uncertainty that we all expect. I think in this case, it's kind of a wash because we have the ability to put it in an interest-bearing account, but I think that's something that merits more discussion in the future, too. Thank you.
Understood.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I agree that it's important to explain to the community why we're doing what we're doing. So my story is going to be on line 50. The sentence says this could potentially save the city roughly $10 million in debt service over the life of the bonds. Let's just say that you're talking about 30 years life for bonds, although I realize some are 20. And let's say you're talking about only $10 million. So that roughly works out to $333,000 a year, or roughly $300,000 a year, that we would save over the life of 30 years if this sentence holds to be true. Is that a correct rendering of the math?
That is based on conservative projections that we have done, and also assumptions on how the interest rates would be.
And when you say conservative, you mean it would be at least that. It could be more savings than that.
Also, it depends on how we structure the bonds with the principal upfront. Later, we have to see that we are in compliance with our 15% debt service to expenditure ratio over the life. So the next 3 years being the key years. So I'm confident that we should be able to structure in a way that we are able to realize approximately 10 million in.
Okay, so that's,
debt service over
as I say, at least $300,000 a year that we're saving. And, you know, the good thing about representing our constituency is they're all quite sophisticated about how finances work, and I'm sure that they would understand the unpredictability of the interest rate market. I guess my question is, what is it that requires us to wait until November to make the go or no-go decision? Are there just like mechanical things that have to happen that take 60 days, or my crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but you know, it's just hard to imagine that we're going to enjoy interest rates this low or lower than this, even if the economy goes soft. There's just not that much room for rates to get much lower. But at any rate, my question is, are we waiting until early November for a specific reason that we think the market's going to do something between now and then that we can predict, or are we waiting because we just need that much time?
We heard from our financial advisors last Monday, and their strong recommendation that we take advantage of the interest rate market right now and go for the full issuance. However, we have a split of the project costs, and depending on the performance of the market over the next 60 days, I think it puts us in a better place to see which projects, if there are any in this list, that we could wait for another 5 to 6 months for the next issuance, if in case we needed to split it out. Just to keep that as a backup option. I'm not saying we'll have to go for it, but just to keep that as a backup option.
Okay, well, that's not an answer that I care to hear, but I understand that you have to make everyone up here happy. So, you know, if that gives us more time to talk about something, I'm just hard put to find any debt listed here that which seems superfluous or unnecessary. I mean, if anything, you know, we have infrastructure needs for traffic calming and other work in the city that if I had my druthers, I'd put onto this project list. So
These are all projects, fundings that have been appropriated by council. It's just the timing of the issuance of the debt.
yeah, I guess I would just say in closing that if we get to November and we're able to issue at a rate that's as favorable as we have now or better, and the savings are at least what you've predicted here or more, that this, you know, future councils entertain the idea that, you know, this list of projects is by no means exhaustive of the needs that the city has. And I would like to see us have a discussion in the next budget cycle, if I'm fortunate enough to be around, that would get into some of those questions. Okay, thanks.
Can I clarify something real quick? Because this is important for folks that are listening and how this may be reported. When we talk about $10 million of savings, this is not like we found $10 million that can be spent on other projects. This is $10 million in savings based on one updated model versus another updated model. So we should be very clear that there's not $10 million of available money that can now be spent on other projects. So when folks read about the potential savings of $10 million, it is based on a comparison of one model versus another model. And we need to be very clear about that. Very clear about that.
That's correct. The one model assumes 3% issuance of the whole amount at 3% now, and the next model assumes 3% for 76 million now, and the remaining 51 million at 4%
Right.
next year.
It's not like we refinanced debt that we already had, and so now we are actually saving money. This is still fresh debt, fresh bonds on things we were expecting to spend money on, but it's not like we have $10 million in found money here. Again, one model versus another, so let's be very clear about that.
If I could follow up with a question. Did you say 3%? That's what you project borrowing the money at? If we borrowed that money today, what would the rate be that we would get, roughly, based on where the market is?
I've heard from our financial advisors that it could be about 20 to 25 basis points lower than that. Also, it depends on.
So for people who are not as clued in, it's 2.5 to 2 3/4%.
To about 2.75, yes. And also, it is a premium market, so in that case, we issue a little less amount of debt, and we get a premium, but the debt service calculated on the lower amount. I do not want to confuse with the details, but there are a lot of things that are in our favor right now as far as the market goes. And that's the intent, to issue the whole debt now to take advantage of those.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Mayor Connell?
Another thing I heard Mr. Mason say last week that I thought was really compelling was beyond the interest rates, that when we went through the 2008 recession, there was a time when the credit market completely seized up, and it was impossible for entities to borrow money for about 6 weeks. So by doing this in one tranche, or a second tranche, we would protect ourselves from that possibility. And again, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that that did happen. So we would protect ourselves in that we wouldn't need to pay money on the high school, that we wouldn't be able to bond at that point, right?
That's correct. And then we also have other details to think about, the fiscal year end and then fund balance and stuff. So it's, if the market froze at that time, we'll be a little bit of a vulnerable position. So.
Okay. So that would definitely be a worst-case scenario if the market freezes. So this would protect us from suffering from that worst-case scenario.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's pretty simple, and I'll just lay that out in a couple of sentences. First of all, I'm mindful, as I think we all are, of the words of our school superintendent, Peter Noonan, Dr. Noonan, who said that Falls Church is well-known as a destination for the education system. People move here, buy houses here, buy apartments here, or put their kids in our school system. So I think that part's kind of well-known and is a safeguard on the potential assets of our real estate that we own and live in. And I think the record shows that at the last downturn in 2008, 2009, 2009 is when it began to be recognized that admittedly, our residential values dipped just a bit, but, they came back to life and greatly soared, and that's where we are today. I have always said that even though the way we're approaching this whole school project is not what I had advocated as long ago as 2 years ago, but that now I'm sitting on council, I promised to make this the best project I could conceive of. And the way to do that, one way of doing that, is to mitigate the risk. So it's very simple. Yes, we're paying 6 months of debt obligations forward for the simple reason of ensuring that we know what we have going forward in terms of risk for the bonds. And that's why we'll support this. I think all the other arguments, should we wait, do we do this, do we do that, this last week I spent a lot of time and a lot of Windex polishing my crystal ball. And I looked at some of the metrics with regard to credit availability 10 years ago. And so, I fully believe what the financial advisor is saying, that, if we can do this now, we ought to do this now, even if we have to pay 6 months' worth of debt. So comes time to, after council exhausts their comments, I'd be happy to move this, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, do you have any comments?
Sure, just very quickly. So the vast majority of this money would be spent on projects that the voters have approved by referendum. The fundamental obligation has already been incurred after an appropriate vote of the citizens. And so what we're doing now, as I view it, is attempting to get a better interest rate and lock it in now, rather than continue the original schedule, which would have exposed us to the potential for significantly increased interest rates with the third tranche. I do think there's obviously still risk. I think the greatest risk is with the development. I urged a more rapid payment proposal. We, as a body, selected the more protracted payment proposal. If there's any risk, that's where it is, but we'll do everything we can to mitigate that risk. But I think I think we could be faulted for not taking this action. Thank you.
All right, other comments? I'll just briefly concur, I think, with my colleagues. To me, locking in the rates, these very low, maybe historic rates, is the prudent way to go. We have the obligation, the school is under construction, it's not going to stop. And given the fact that we can actually earn pretty good interest on the money that we have, the delta is very small. And I think there's a much greater risk that interest rates could spike. At that particular moment, we're going to push off our third tranche, in which case the taxpayers of Falls Church could be paying a higher interest rate for the next 30 years because we wanted to squeeze every last penny and try to get the very lowest rate possible. But sometimes you can be cleverer by half and wait for that precise lowest moment in interest rates and in turn miss taking advantage of some really great rates that are there right now. And although Mr. Lichtenhouse is right that these savings, quote, aren't on what level, there is this, but this is off budgeting. You know, we presented this proposal to our voters who accepted it as we proposed it, and we were conservative, and I'm glad we're conservative as a body. This council, I believe, is very conservative in terms of what we present to our voters and our citizens. And thankfully, things have come in better than expected. Interest rates are lower than we anticipated. But I think the ability to go ahead and lock these in long-term is advantageous to the city and to our taxpayers, and so I will support that as well. Unless there's anything else to be said, why don't we go ahead and have a
Mayor, I move to adopt TR 19-29.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
I think this needs to have a public hearing before.
You're absolutely right, and my apologies. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Why don't we start all over again? Do we have a motion, Mr. C?
Mayor, I move that we adopt TR 19-29.
Second again.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The motion passes.
All right, thank you, and we're off to the consent agenda. It looks like there's only one item on the agenda. Mr. Shields, do you want to give us a very brief description of that?
Yes, Council, this is a request to authorize the city manager on behalf of the city to ratify past expenditures of $164,955.31 under a contract with Paxton Company's Office Moving Division for moving services. The city has had this contract since July 2013, and at that time that the contract was entered into, it was anticipated that costs would be below the $100,000 mark, so it was not brought to City Council for approval. But since that time, we did exceed the $100,000 limit, and so we're now asking for council for this retroactive approval. We do regret coming to council for this retroactively. We're reviewing our procedures to make sure that this doesn't happen. The expenses over the 6-year period mostly were incurred in the last 2 years related to the City Hall move. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that, but that is the request on this item.
All right, so does anyone want to remove the item that was just described from the consent agenda?
If I ask a question, that means it has to be removed, is that right?
I don't know. Look, it's not going to make one.
I think it's under other business, actually.
Oh, it is on under other business. My
that's
apologies.
correct.
It looked like it was under consent agenda. All right, so go ahead and ask a question. And
So the expenditure was $165,000, but what was the total contract? I'm trying to get a sense of how much the overage was over the base.
It's actually a per unit cost contract. So when the contract was originally entered into by the city, we made an estimate of how much we thought we would use it. And at that time, with that estimate, we thought we'd be under the threshold. Over the 6-year period, our usage has exceeded that contract, that $100,000 limit.
So mainly, you said the last 2 years with the City Hall move.
That is correct.
And so how much more than did we spend on the City Hall moving?
Well, I don't have that figure right at the tip of my tongue. Some of the things that we did when we were planning the City Hall move, we anticipated that we would rely more on city staff, on the Department of Public Works to help us with the move. And when it came down to it, either there was specialized equipment that was needed, for instance, to move some of the safes that are that the city has. It was only their equipment that could move them. In addition, when the move happened, our elevator broke during the move, and so there were some cost increases because they had to carry the things up the stairs as opposed to using the elevator, and that actually happened both on the move out of this building and on the move out of 400 North Washington. So those are some of the things that occurred. We also, when it came down to it, Public Works staff were busy doing other things. We relied more heavily on Paxton than was originally planned.
So I know we've asked for this in the past, but I think separate from this, it'd be nice to have a conversation about where we are with City Hall and the total budget at the end of all of this.
Yeah, we're getting close to wrapping that up.
All right, anything else? Does any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. What kind of action are you seeking, Mr. Shields?
There's a motion, so the request is to move to authorize the city manager on behalf of the city to increase the city's contract amount for its contract for moving services with Paxton Companies to a total of $164,955.31. I would note that this contract is closed out, and so that is the extent of the expenditures. We will have a contract that will be coming to council at your next meeting for moving of the library. Moving libraries is a specialized contractor, and so it's a different contractor than this one that we'll be using for the library, but that'll be a discussion for your next meeting.
All right, do we have a motion?
Can I say so moved, or do I need to read what Mr. Shields just read? Should I read it?
Yes, you should.
Okay. I move to authorize the city manager on behalf of the city to increase the city's contract amount for its contract for moving services with Paxton Companies Office Moving Division to a total of $164,955.31 to cover expenditures already made.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The motion passes.
All right, let's keep going. We do have a closed session tonight, so I just want to remind everyone on that. Is there any business not on the agenda? Standing, regional committee, council liaison reports? All right, any council member comments? Mr. Duncan, approval of the minutes?
Mr. Mayor, on line 58, we want to, not toe, I believe. And with that correction, I move approval of minutes of the meeting of Monday, April 22nd, 2019.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. Our last item here will be a authorization to go into closed session. I'm going to go ahead and read the motion. Upon a motion made by council member,
Z.
all right, and seconded by council member,
Connolly.
all right, Connolly, and passed by vote of city council. Council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 for discussion or consideration of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city council. This is the city-owned parcel on Park Place, RPC number 53-104-015. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Z? Tarter? Yep. Okay. So where do you propose having this closed session?
I would recommend Oak Room.
Okay. So, and then we'll come back and reconvene here to come out of closed session? Is that the plan? All right. Thank you all for coming. We're going to go to closed session. Appreciate it. All right. We ready to reconvene? Why don't we come out of closed session? Upon a motion made by council member,
Connolly.
Seconded by Councilmember.
Duncan.
And passed by a vote of City Council. Council reconvene in open session. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. All right, and it is, what time is it?
10:10.
10:10. Okay, here's our certification. Upon a motion made by Councilmember,
Duncan.
seconded by Councilmember,
Z.
and passed upon affirmative roll call in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the City Council. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yep.
Snyder?
Yep.
Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep, okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Mayor, move that to adjourn.
All right, all in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Good day.